Welcome, everybody. Today we have insanity, and then we're going to talk about some more insanity. And then I'm going to make a case why I think property market in Australia at the moment is a sell. Just like the brokers look at particular companies and their stock shares, and they can declare it according to their research a buy, a hold, or a sell. Property is a sell in this brokerage house. And naturally, as always, it's not a financial advice, just my opinion. So, what insanity, may you ask? Here's a little hint.
Not business as usual. The corporate community divided as workers walk off the job for the day of action on climate change. And hot property in a cold climate. Why alpine real estate is in demand as thousands of Australian workers got a leave pass today from their employers to join school students in striking to demand action on climate change.
You can't ignore the impact of climate change. Modelling from the CSIRO predicts average seasons will become anywhere between 20 to 55 days shorter in the next 30 years. In the worst case modelling, it would leave just a month of skiing by 2050.
Now, one of Australia's largest mountain groups has been bought by the biggest international player around.
Two of Victoria's largest resorts, Hotham and Falls Creek, have been snapped up by Vale Resorts, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The company purchased Perisher in New South Wales in 2015, part of a plan to deal with climate change by operating a global suite of resorts spanning hemispheres, seasons and conditions.
Okay, so you got people walking off the job in Sydney with placards saying, "Won't somebody please listen to the children?" I mean, this was a joke. These people don't realize that this was actually a joke in Simpsons. That if you don't have an argument, you can just make an argument by saying, "Won't somebody please listen to the children?" Which I think was Ned Flanders' wife. So it was close enough. Won't somebody please think of the children? Now, how is that supposed to be an argument? When I was a child, I knew nothing. I just knew what adults told me, what the school told me. So that completely is not an argument. And if you throw children into any line, so anyone who disagrees with that line is against the children is kind of sneaky and wizardry. Fear everywhere. I believe that this planet, this world, is going to be around for a long, long, long time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't look after the environment, but as far as the climate change, how do we know that we are causing the climate change? Let's not forget that they used to be called global warming, but it wasn't that convenient, so they had to rename it and say climate change. So every time you have a temperature going up and down, which is what the climate has done for hundreds and thousands of years, you can say, see, I told you, there's a climate change. Even if it cools, which is what is looking like it's going to happen, unfortunately. Looks like we might be going into a little mini ice age, which apparently happened just as recent as the 1600s. So what is a little ice age? So 1600s, mini ice age, 1600s. A little ice age is a period between about 1300 and 1870, during which Europe and North America was subjected to much colder winters than during the 20th century. The period can be divided in two phases. The first beginning around 1300 and continuing until the late 1400s. We didn't have all the CO2 emissions that we have now, and the only way to actually prove that we are causing it, whatever the temperature direction is, up or down, is to eliminate human race for a couple of hundred years and then measure temperatures, maybe leave one or two scientists to measure temperatures and see if the temperatures have gone up or down. That's the only way to do it scientifically, yet they're telling us that scientifically we have global warming. Oh wait, it's actually climate change. So you make up your mind which way the temperature is going. In any case, we will be right because the climate is changing. Okay, and the best way to figure something out is to follow the money. Now, right, everyone, the consensus is that the climate is warming, yet how about this?
You can't ignore the impact of climate change. Modelling from the CSIRO predicts average seasons will become anywhere between 20 to 55 days shorter in the next 30 years. In the worst case modelling, it would leave just a month of skiing by 2050.
So the government scientific body is telling us that the climate is changing, I think warming. Yes, we're only going to have seasons of 1 month, yet
Resorts say better management.
Now, one of Australia's largest mountain groups has been bought by the biggest international player around.
Two of Victoria's largest resorts, Hotham and Falls Creek, have have been snapped up by Vail Resorts, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The company purchased Perisher in New South Wales in 2015, part of a plan to deal with climate change.
So an American privately or publicly listed company, New York Stock Exchange, Vail Resources, this is the chart of 5 years, whose share keeps going up, is buying up our resorts, ski resorts, full well knowing, quote unquote, knowing that there's only going to be about a month worth of season, worst case scenario, or definitely there's going to be less of the business they're in available for them to tap into. Now, of course, they can capitalize in tourists outside of the season. However, the main money is made during the winter season. They wouldn't be buying it if they thought that the snow was melting. And before somebody says, yeah, but they can make their own snow, yes, you can, unless the temperature is under a certain level, in which case even the snow making machines are not a viable solution. And they're buying it at the time when the Australian property is almost close to the peak and looking like it's about to fall. Maybe they know something that the mainstream government bodies, quote unquote scientific bodies, are telling us. This is the insanity bit. So I suppose this makes me officially a climate change denier. And I will definitely be wrong because climate is changing and it's always been changing. So if you call me a climate change denier, you are correct, but that's just play of words. I just don't think that humans are causing the climate change. Are we causing pollution? Yes, we are. How much of it is it translating into climate change? Very little or any, if anything. So just the same way that the industry, property building industry likes to keep us in the, or real estate industry like to keep us in the state of fear. So the common denominator word here is fear. Please don't fear. Don't have a fear of missing out. Don't have a fear of this world ending, because it's not going to end unless something much bigger than the climate change intervenes. Now that we've had some people unsubscribe from the channel and many subscribe, let me go into why I think currently property market is a sell. Oh, by the way, another reason rich are buying houses near the water is because, oh, it's going to be flooded by rising seawaters. Of course not. Do you see the properties near the water, by the water, pretty much at the water level, prices going down or up at the moment? So the high end is going up. These are the coastal areas, Sydney Harbour, it's going up. Why would people be investing their money if that's all going to be flooded in a decade or 12 years? I think somebody said we've got 12 years before we are doomed. I really don't want to wait for 12 years to be able to tell you I told you so. The world hasn't changed and definitely hasn't ended.
And new international investment, it's a surprisingly positive time for Australia's alpine industries.
Meaning more people looking to stay as climate change hits places of fragile beauty.
Now, this is not a hit at ABC, which is very left-leaning outlet. So is 95% of the mainstream media. But so many assumptions and contradictions. It kind of reminds me of the real estate industry. The whole reason I started this channel is when I saw and realized that there was something wrong. It just didn't make sense. The way the government was spruiking real estate as well as um, or by trying to get us into loans and mortgages that we really shouldn't get, and in the process raking in all the profits, all the revenue from stamp duties and other taxes. I knew there was something wrong in the language, and the same thing with the global warming script, that the climate change, it just doesn't add up. I like to ask questions. Okay, so second part of this video is a little scenario. All right, the scenario is kind of simple. You have $200,000 cash in the bank, and you're thinking, everyone's talking about this bail-in, money's dead money in the bank, but should I keep the $200,000 in the bank? So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is to use those $200,000 as a deposit, 20% deposit, to buy a $1 million house in, say, Sydney. Obviously, to buy a $1 million house with a $200,000, you need a mortgage of $800,000. Forgot to mention. Kind of goes without saying. Now, because few people have asked, and I've got the same question, and nobody's able to answer the question, what happens if there's a bail-in? If the banks get in trouble, they lose liquidity, they can't get funds, for whatever other reason, the government is not going to save the banks anymore, the taxpayers. It's going to have to be the actual depositors. So the sub scenario is that there is such crisis, and you have your $200,000 wiped out by a bail-in of 20%. Okay, in that case, your $200,000 becomes $160,000, meaning that you've lost $40,000 due to this bail-in, due to the bank getting into all sorts of troubles, and or financial system just completely blowing up, and the government says we haven't got money, you're just going to have to take a haircut. So your haircut is $40,000 on a $200,000. Okay, so instead of keeping that $200,000 in the bank and losing $40,000, you have bought yourself $1 million house in Sydney with your $200,000 and a mortgage of $800,000, making it into a million. So again, there's bank troubles. There's a lack of liquidity. So not only is people with deposits having problems, those people can't get to their money or they've lost 20%. They can't, potential buyers cannot get loans, i.e., a lack of liquidity. They can't get approvals, and there's fewer buyers on the market. And to be fair, and for this scenario, the property drops 20% from where it is at that time. Okay, so falls 20%. So your $1 million house all of a sudden is worth $800,000. $800,000, which is not as much as a 40% drop as I predicted, for example. So it's very likely that that can happen. So what does this make your loss to be? All of a sudden, your capital loss is $200,000. Because you've got to remember, although you've only put in $200,000 as a deposit to get $800,000 loan to get $1 million house, this is now yours. You owe bank $1 million, of which 200,000 is yours, which means that you owe them $800,000 really. But all up, your house, your investments has dropped $200,000, meaning that at the end of the day, you've lost $200,000. So to recap, if you kept your $200,000 in the bank, you lose $40,000. If you bought yourself a property, which also dropped the same amount of that bail-in, you have lost $200,000. So which one would you rather do? Lose $40,000 or $200,000? I know the option number three would be not to lose any money or to make money, but this is the case of that everybody's fearing that if you keep your money in the bank, fear of missing out, they're going to bail it in. They know how much money you have. Don't worry. When you buy property, they know you own it, and they know how much it's worth, and there's no way of getting away from the government or the government censors or getting off the grid. Say you've gone somewhere far away in rural Australia and bought yourself a farm, doesn't matter, your name is still against that property and the mortgage. So there's no such thing as getting off the grid. Again, not financial advice, but there's nothing wrong at or with keeping your money in the bank and potentially being a lot more nimble and being able to use that $200,000 to deploy or, for example, buy some of it, buy some gold, silver, buy some stock. In this scenario, there could be a third scenario where you've put all your $200,000 in the stock market and the stock market's dropped 20%. You've only lost $40,000 as opposed to $200,000. So you leveraged yourself into this loss. So unless the next stage and step is property, again, booming another 20-30%, there's really no reason to be shoving your money into a deposit and then mortgaging hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy property at this stage. I think the best thing to do is just sit tight. The saver's time will come. Not financial advice, but definitely my honest opinion at this stage. Because property is still going bonkers, the money is still too cheap, everybody's able to get a mortgage. Royal Commission has done nothing to clean up the system and sort out bank shenanigans. So I suppose the main takeaway here is that let's not fear anything. When we're in a state of fear, we make mistakes. So let's not fear the climate change or fear of missing out. The property and this world will be here next year and the year after, believe me. I'm kind of glad I ended on this positive note. So with that, thank you for watching and we'll talk again soon.